What does that say up there? Recording started. Oh, TK to YouTube. Oh, all right, guys. Man, okay. Connective tissue. Jam-packed video here, okay? 8 different types of tissues we have to go over, okay? We're going to try and make this as easy as possible and make it as painless as possible, all right? But this one's going to be very jam-packed. And like I said in the last video, if you watched it, this is going to be the longest one out of all of the different distinguishing types of tissues that we're going through, okay? And that's just because of the quantity. Quantity, a lot of stuff we got to go through, okay? So without further ado, let's dive in. Connective tissue, also called CT, okay? Don't get it confused with a CT scan. It's not the same thing. But for this class, what we're going to call it is CT, or connective tissue, all right? So connective tissues are a diverse set of tissues that include fibrous tissue, adipose tissue, cartilage, bone, blood. Oh my gosh, it's a lot of stuff, okay? They are characterized by having lots of matrix and relatively few cells, okay? So when I say that, if you want to think of a distinguishing characteristic of connective tissue, okay, it's going to be the matrix, okay? I'm not talking about the Matrix from 1999, not that movie, all right? When I say it has a lot of matrix to it, okay, it's going to give it a very distinguishing appearance, okay? What it's usually going to look like, it's going to have like a glossy, smooth-looking appearance. That's what the matrix does to it, okay? The cells, for example, we saw it in the last video, okay? The epithelial tissue had all those cells, those dark dots, okay? Granted, connective tissue has some, okay? But it has a lot more matrix to it, and that's going to give it a much more glossy, shiny-looking appearance. That is the big distinguishing feature, okay? So because the matrix is abundant in the connective tissue, the components of the matrix, ground substance / extracellular fluid, and the fibers, as I said, become an important distinguishing feature of the various CT types. There are 3 different types of fibers found in connective tissue: collagen, reticular, and elastic. Due to the diverse nature of connective tissue types, the functions of connective tissues may vary widely, including binding tissues together, support or movement, energy storage, or transportation for blood, okay? The vascularity of connective tissues also varies greatly, from highly vascularized, such as loose fibrous tissue, to avascular, such as cartilage, okay? So, per usual, identification of the tissues from the photos, name the function of the tissues, name the location, and then we did this in class, finding them under the microscope, okay? 4 things we should be able to do. Now, let's start. Letter A, dense connective tissue, dense CT. It is characterized by having densely packed collagen fibers and very little ground substance, okay? The collagen fibers give the tissue a very wavy, smooth, shiny looking appearance, okay? We can kind of see it down here. You can kind of see how this looks like some waves, especially over here. It looks like just kind of like if you were to drop like a bath bomb in a bathtub, you were to swirl your hand around, all those colors, the colors would kind of mix and match, go kind of all over the place. That's the appearance that it gives, okay? So, there are 2 types of dense CT, okay? The first one is dense regular CT, okay? In this, the collagen fibers are arranged in a regular parallel pattern. We can kind of see this here. It looks like, lines here running parallel, right? Has a wave line, parallel looking appearance to it, okay? We need the regular CT because the collagen fibers are parallel, but what they are responsible for are resisting predictable stresses, okay? Such as what would occur in tendons and ligaments, okay? So for example, if we think about the biceps helps us to do bicep curls. Now the biceps doesn't move in a whole bunch of different directions, right? It just moves up and down. Hence why we have the dense regular CT here that's arranged in this regular pattern, because it resists predictable stresses, as it's saying here, okay? Resistant to the predictable stress of that biceps going up and down. On the contrary, dense irregular CT, the collagen fibers are randomly arranged. A bunch of stuff here, right? All over the place. They're all randomly arranged, okay? Which enables the tissue to resist unpredictable stresses, okay? Such as what would occur in the dermis. So if anyone was ever younger, remember, maybe you had an older sibling, maybe you had some friends, they would come up to you, they'd do a snake bite to your skin, remember? That's when they come up to, maybe grab your arm or something, they'd grab your arm with both their hands, one arm or one hand would rotate one direction, the other one would rotate the other direction. So by doing that, it allows for unpredictable stress resistance, okay, as it says here. That's what the dense irregular CT does. It allows for resistance to unpredictable stresses and movements and stuff in the dermis, okay? Dense CT, oh my gosh, erase that. Dense CT has relatively few blood vessels in it, okay? Has relatively few blood vessels, hence why we can't really see them here very well, okay? Where are we going to find these things, okay? Tendons and ligaments. This is going to be the regular, okay? We'll put an R here. The dermis is going to be for the irregular, IR, okay? That's the two different places you can find dense connective tissue, all right? That's that. Next, loose areolar, okay? You can also call it just areolar. Loose connective tissue, okay? Loose CT is characterized by having lots of ground substance and fibers, okay? There are two types of loose, areolar and reticular. We're not going to focus on this guy. We're not focusing on reticular in this lab. We're strictly focusing on the areolar CT. It contains all three fiber types. It has collagen, elastic, and reticular fibers in them, okay? Loose areolar is found mostly in every part of the body since it is found underneath all epithelia. The loose arrangement of the fibers here allow for easy passage of nerves, blood vessels, white blood cells, and diffusion of nutrients and waste through the tissue, okay? Loose CT is highly vascular, okay? Highly vascular, all right? So you can kind of see, you can kind of pick out all the different hodgepodges of things here, okay? It has a little bit of some collagen here. It has the elastic fibers in there. It has a couple little cells in there. But the main function of this guy is, like it said up in the paragraph, it binds epithelia to deeper tissues. Allows for easy passage of vessels, because it's highly vascular. Easy passage of vessels, nerves, nutrients, and wastes, okay? Where would you usually find this? And this is mostly going to be in the dermis and all underlying epithelia, okay? So for example, we have the epidermis here, okay? We have the stratified squamous epithelia. We can see it here, okay? We have the basement membrane here, separating this guy. I'm kind of drawing a weird shape. Basement membrane, okay? And just below that, we have the areolar CT, okay? Remember, areolar binds epithelia to deeper tissues. So the basement membrane, usually what's right below that is the areolar CT that binds it to, for example here, dense irregular CT, which is where you would typically find, and be typically found in the dermis, okay? All right, so that's the loose or areolar connective tissue, okay? So scroll down here. Adipose tissue, okay? This one I think is probably, this one along with bone is probably, oh gosh, this one, bone and blood are probably the easiest to distinguish of all three of the cartilage types, or the connective tissues, okay? The reason why I say that is because adipose tissue, when I see this, when I think about this, I always just think about marshmallows, okay? Adipose is also known as fat. It's mostly comprised of fat storage cells called adipocytes. All of these white globs here are the adipocytes, okay? When I see these, I think of marshmallows. Marshmallows typically aren't the most healthy things for us to eat. They do have some fat substance to them, right? So when I think about adipose tissue, I think about all these marshmallows, okay? The adipose, yeah, that's how I distinguish them. As it says here, the adipocytes look like large, empty cells with a cell nucleus pressed to one side. The space between the cells is occupied by loose connective tissue and blood vessels. Since fat is our body's primary mechanism for storing energy long term, energy storage, along with providing insulation and cushioning, is the main functions here, okay? So, distinguishing characteristics. It looks like marshmallows. It looks like big fat globlets of marshmallows, all packed together, okay? Main function, energy storage, okay? For anyone who goes and works out, okay? For long distance running, it can be a mix between using fat and using carbs as energy. But for those of you who go and use the Stairmaster, for those of you who go in and use the treadmill, but they put the incline up really high and they walk on it, the primary energy you are probably using, unless your heart rate is through the roof, if it stays really, really low when you're doing that, is going to be fat mostly, okay? That's why it's really good if you're ever doing weightlifting, you're ever cutting down in weight, to do those exercises because it helps burn fat, okay? Use that as the energy. So it is also good for insulation, okay? It's also good for cushioning tissues, okay? That's adipose tissue. Mostly found in the hypodermis, also found in breast tissue and other surrounding organs. So if anybody ever takes a cadaver anatomy class, I strongly encourage you to take a look and find adipose tissue because it's everywhere. Okay, it's overlying our intestines, it's overlying liver, it's overlying the breast tissue, as it says here. It's very easy to find. It's in high numerous numbers, okay? High numerous numbers in the body. Okay. Different types of cartilage, okay? So this is kind of a subcategory, okay, of the connective tissue. That's because cartilage is relatively stiff. It's a relatively stiff connective tissue with a flexible rubbery matrix that provides structural support, okay? We're going to talk about 3 different types of cartilage here, okay? The first one being hyaline cartilage. But before I get to that, cartilage is produced by cells called chondroblasts. Chondro meaning cartilage in Latin, and the blasts are meaning the cells that produce them, okay? Which secrete the matrix. Ultimately, these cells get trapped in little cavities called lacunae. Once enclosed in lacunae, the cells are called chondrocytes. Lacunae and the corresponding cell nuclei of the chondrocytes are easily visible within tissue samples, okay? The reason being is because they look like eyes, okay? We can kind of see them down here. They look like eyes. They have like those little dots in them. Those are lacunae, okay? So one other distinguishing characteristic is they mostly work in pairs, okay? Lacunae mostly are found in pairs, so you kind of see them next to each other. Here. Pair, 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 pair. But the lacunae are arranged in different varieties depending on which type of cartilage you're looking at, okay? So with hyaline cartilage, what you're going to have is it's going to have a lot of collagen fibers. They give it a smooth, glassy-looking appearance, okay? Lacunae in hyaline cartilage are often found in pairs, as it says here. The hyaline cartilage is most common is the most common and is the most flexible of all the cartilages, okay? It is mostly found in like the flexible portion of your nose. It covers the ends of bones at the synovial joints, articular cartilage, and it forms the supportive structure of the respiratory tract, okay? It also helps connect the ribs to the sternum, all right? So down here, what do we see? Well, we can see the lacunae down here. They're found in pairs, all right? They have that glossy looking appearance to it, all right? And that's because of the collagen. So A and B here, just 2 different examples. This one is hyaline cartilage at 100 times. This one is at 40 times, just for example. And as we had the examples down here where it's found for locations, okay? All right, elastic cartilage. So elastic cartilage is characterized by having many dark elastic fibers to it that give it a rough appearance, okay? So the lacunae in elastic cartilage is mostly a random appearance, okay? Granted, we kind of see it, next to each other, but we kind of see it's like kind of just a hodgepodge. It's all over the place, okay? Elastic, in the name, elastic always has to retain the original shape after it's stretched out. So, for example, the external ear. We can push our ears down, but as soon as we let those guys go, or we let them go, it goes back to its original shape, okay? That's because it can be stretched and moved in a bunch of random directions. Your ear can, right? It could be twisted, it could be folded over, it could be yanked on, but it always will return back to the same original structure that it had when you let go of it. The epiglottis is another example. The epiglottis is best known for being in it's basically our division point between our windpipe here and the esophagus. So when we swallow, the epiglottis covers over the top of the windpipe, so that way we don't get food or anything down the windpipe. It always retains back to its original structure after you're done swallowing food, drinks, whatever, okay? So that's elastic cartilage. Fibrocartilage, a little bit different. So now we have lacunae, but now they exist in rows, as we can see here, okay? So let's really try and zoom in here. We can try and see some of these rows. So we can kind of see the rows here, right? They're organized here as such. Row here, row here. If we scroll over, we kind of make out the rows here, right? I'm going to go through one here. We kind of see a row there, row here, for example, okay? So what fibrocartilage is, it's parallel collagen fibers that exist in rows. The more organized arrangement of the cells in the fibers makes fibrocartilage the strongest and the most rigid, least flexible type of cartilage. It can resist compression, absorb shock, so it's found in many places in our body that endure more stress than one another. Okay, so that would be like the intervertebral discs. It would be like the menisci in the knee, the pubic symphysis. All right, which is a landmark in our pelvis, which we'll talk about in the next coming weeks. Functions here: resisting compression, absorbing shock, and it gives us the examples: the menisci, the intervertebral discs in between each of our vertebrae, and the pubic symphysis down here. Okay. So those are the 3 types of cartilage, okay, a part of the CT. Bone now, so bone has another subcategory to it, and I shouldn't say subcategory. It has sub-concepts that you guys need to know, okay? And we talked about this because this is a part of one of the focused learning objectives. Bone is a very hard and calcified connective tissue arranged in cylinder-like structures called osteons, okay? So an osteon consists of a series of layers or rings called lamellae, okay? So if we zoom in really big here, okay? This is an osteon, okay? Let's get a different color here so we can outline this better. Osteon is this entire cylindrical, circular-like structure that I'm outlining, okay? This entire thing looks like the inside of a tree, almost, right? You know, you look on the inside of the trees, you find all the rings, see how old it is. Same structure here, okay? But this is what the osteon is, okay? Lacunae are the black, discs that we can see in here, okay? So I'm going to highlight one real quick. One of the black discs that we see in there, okay? The lamellae, on the other hand, are the rings that surround a large central canal. The central canal is that big hole that's in the middle. The lamellae are the rings that we can see here, okay? They're like these, on this picture to the right, the dark blue, you can see these dark blue rings kind of encircling that central canal. That's the lamellae here, okay? It's kind of hard to distinguish with the arrow because of how thin they are. That's the lamellae, okay? The lamellae contain the lacunae. As we can see here, the lacunae are kind of encompassed within those rings, okay? So the lamellae hold on to the lacunae, okay? I always think about this because lamellae, mine, M. Lamellae, mine. Lacunae, your mine. Lamellae, your mine, okay? They hold on to them, okay? So the lamellae surround the large central canal. The lamellae contain the lacunae, as we talked about, okay? So lacunae are visible as the small black dots, as I pointed out. The tiny channels, the other thing that's in here, are called the canaliculi, okay? The little canal. So the central canal, the big openings here, the canaliculi are like these small hair-like projections that come and connect to each of those lacunae, those black structures in there, okay? So canaliculi means little canals, and they are the little canals that run in between the lamellae because what they allow for is they allow for the osteocytes that are inside of the lamellae to contact each other and to access the nutrients from the blood vessels that run through the central canal, okay? Though bone is the most rigid of all the tissues, it has an excellent blood supply, okay? It allows it to heal very quickly and adapt to its environment through a process called bone remodeling. Bone tissues provide physical support for the body, and bony structures such as the skull, vertebral column, and the rib cage to protect all the vital organs, okay? Most of the body's calcium is stored in the bone tissue, okay? So that's everything labeled here. Function, structural support, protection, calcium storage. Over here we can see the central canal. Let's get a different color here. We can see the central canal here, okay, right in the center. We can see the lacunae. If we really zoom in, you can just make out the rings of the lamellae. You can just make out the little finger-like projections stretching in between each of the lamellae, the canaliculi, okay? And then, of course, the entire structure that makes up everything is called the osteon. And remember, we had those osteon models for you all to look at in class, okay? Just to help kind of bridge the concept here of how to look at these in 3D, okay? Because this is just a cross-section. This is just a small 2D model. But osteons are traditionally 3D because bones are 3D structures that we have, okay? Okay, so I think we just have one more down here. Yes, we just have one more, and then we have to go through the review down here. Yep. So the last one here, in blood, like I said, this is another very easily distinguishing color here. Oh, what the heck happened? There we go. And blood is another very easy distinguishing one that we have because blood consists of a fluid matrix, the blood plasma, and has several types of formed elements such as red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets in them, okay? Because blood is mostly liquid, it is characterized by having an abundant open space. We can see it here, okay? Red blood cells are extremely prevalent. They appear as the pale pink discs here. White blood cells and platelets are less numerous. The platelets are the very small dots here you can just barely make out, okay? And these other guys here, you have these kind of interesting weird structures. These are the white blood cells here, okay? These are the white blood cells. And we'll talk about those more when we get into ANP140, okay? So blood is found in the heart and blood vessels and functions to transport various substances such as oxygen, carbon dioxide, nutrients, waste, hormones, all this stuff, all throughout the body. While the white blood cells provide immune defenses, and the platelets, for example, help with clotting factors, okay? So functions are to help transport, immune defense here, and the locations you mostly find these in would be the blood vessels in the heart, okay? All right, so that's everything there, and then we had, of course, all the different slides up here. Helpful hints, okay? I gave you the big helpful hints. In most CT, you won't see a lot of nuclei close to each other. Instead, there's a lot of space for that ground substance, okay? Where that ground substance can give things that glossy, that wavy-looking appearance to it, okay? You're not going to see a lot of the cells, okay? In general, the arrangement of cells and fibers will appear random, unlike the ordered appearance of epithelia, okay? Obviously, some of them have more of an arrangement-looking appearance, such as like the fibrocartilage looks a little more uniform with the rows of the lacunae. The dense connective tissue, if it's not irregular, if it's the regular, it's going to look more arranged. Remember, the irregular one is kind of like that bath bomb in the water. It looks kind of like a hodgepodge of different things. Okay. Versus the collagen fibers have a smooth, shiny, or wavy appearance to them. The elastic or reticular fibers appear dark and rigid. Cartilage is easy to discern from fibrous connective tissue because chondrocytes with large dark nuclei exist inside lacunae. Okay, lacunae, remember, are those dark eyes. Remember those dark spots. All right, and then of course down here we have our table, which we are going to go through. Okay, so distinguishing characteristics. What is something that we're going to be looking for inside of dense CT? Okay. So what we're going to see here primarily is the dense packed collagen with little ground substance. Okay. That guy picked in there for you. And it's going to have a wavy, smooth appearance. All right. And remember, this is going to change a little bit when you have versus the regular and the irregular. Okay. So remember, we make sure we know those guys. The primary function of these guys are to help bind tissues together and to resist stress. And resisting stress is primarily for the irregular shaped. All right. My spelling, of course, is always off per usual. Example locations you'll find this. This will be in like the tendons. This will be in the ligaments and the dermis primarily. Okay. Perfect. Loose areolar. Remember, there's also reticular. Excuse me. But we're just talking about the loose, okay? What we're going to see here is lots of ground substance, okay? Lots of ground substance in this one. So, remember what this guy's going to look like. We'll scroll all the way up here to the loose CT. It's going to have like another wavy looking appearance, but you're going to see it just since it has three different types of fibers, has collagen, elastic, and reticular. It's going to have a hodgepodge of a little bit of everything in here. So it has all these lines going through it. It has some different variety of cells in here. You can see the collagen fibers in there. So it's going to have a little bit of everything. Lots of ground substance. Wavy. You're going to have fibers. I'll say a little bit of everything in here. Okay. We'll zoom this guy down so it fits in the box. Good. Primary functions here. Remember, this helps to bind epithelia to deeper tissues and passage of vessels through it. All right, perfect. Example locations will be in the dermis and underlying the epithelia. So just directly below it. Okay, just below it. All right, adipose tissue here. Remember, this is the one that I think is the easiest to distinguish, or one of the easiest. They're going to have large, empty cells, marshmallow-looking appearance to it. That's my big key takeaway there. It has that marshmallow-looking appearance. Primary functions are for storage of energy, insulation, resisting. Or cushioning, excuse me, cushioning. Cushioning. All right. Insulation. Gosh. Cursor's going crazy on me. Okay. That. What else we're going to have? It's going to be located in the hypodermis. So below the dermis layer, okay? It's going to be located in the hypodermis. It's going to be found in breast tissue and surrounding organs. All right. Perfect. Hyaline cartilage. Remember, this is the first of the 3 types of cartilages here. We have 1, 2, and 3. That subcategory. Hyaline. Remember what you're going to see here. You're going to see a smooth, glassy appearance here. How about the lacunae? Lacunae arranged in pairs here. Primarily what you're going to see, okay. All right. This is primarily for flexible support. So you'll find this in a lot of the articular joints that we have, okay. And then for the example locations, this will be in like the nose, rib cage, articular cartilage, articular joints, for example, and the trachea. Awesome. All right, elastic cartilage. What's this one going to look like? So remember, this one is the dark elastic fibers with a rough appearance to them. So remember, these guys, they're kind of in a hodgepodge. We scroll up here. Elastic right here. Remember, it has to be able to resist a bunch of different stresses that are put upon it, okay? Because it always has to retain back to the original structure it has, all right? The random arrangement. And yeah, the lacunae here. Lacunae in random arrangement. The eye-looking structures, okay? Primary function of this guy is elastic support. Pretty easy, okay? Pretty straightforward there. And where is this going to be located? Like the external ear, epiglottis, for example. Another example. Fibrocartilage, parallel collagen fibers that exists in rows. The same thing with the lacunae. Lacunae exists in rows. All right. And we saw that up here in this picture. The lacunae existed in rows. Yep. Bang, 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 bang. The rows of those black lines in the pictures there, okay? Function of fibrocartilage, so resist compression, such as the intervertebral discs. That's the main function of them. And absorb shock. That's just a few of the functions there. We'd find these in the IV discs, the intervertebral discs, okay? Also in the menisci or the pubic symphysis. All right. Perfect. A couple more here, guys. Bone. All right, remember this is that kind of has like the sub-knowledge, sub-category things you need to know. Lacunae, lamellae, central canal, the osteon, all that stuff, okay? Bone. Very distinguishing appearance to it. It has the circle, cylindrical-like structures on them. So it has a cylindrical arrangement. And that is from the osteons. Okay. Good. What's the main function? So it gives us structural support, protection, vital organs like the rib cage, for example, protects a lot of those vital organs. And then calcium storage. Remember, about 99% of the calcium in our body is stored here. Okay. All right, so where are you going to find this? Bones. Easy, right? Bone is bones. Translate the bones. Pretty easy. Okay. Lastly, here we have blood. Remember, this is the fluid matrix 1. Tons of red blood cells. Has white blood cells and some platelets. All right. Perfect. That one's pretty easy. Bone, blood, and adipose tissue, I think, are the easiest ones. The other 5 are the ones that just take a little bit of extra practice and a little more time distinguishing, okay? Primary function here, transportation of nutrients, gases, etc. And we'll also say and for immune defense. Hence what the white blood cells are for, okay? Awesome. And then last guy here, where we're going to find this, it's going to be found in blood vessels and the heart. Okay. All right. So, guys, 8 different connective tissues here, okay? 8. There's a lot, okay? A lot of things that look pretty similar, right? With the exception, I think, of fat, blood, and bone. Those ones are pretty distinguishing, but you can argue that cartilage, they all look pretty similar here, right? They all have pretty similar colors here. But the big distinguishing characteristics here, of how you're going to distinguish these, are how are the lacunae arranged for the cartilage, okay? Are they all kind of random? Are they in rows here? Are they in pairs here? That's the big distinguishing characteristic, okay, for how you distinguish the 2 types of cartilage. 3 types, excuse me. Adipose, really easy, the marshmallows, right? But down here, how are we distinguishing the loose versus the dense, okay? Remember, dense has wavy-looking appearances to it, but it has 2 types because it has one here that looks like a bath bomb, has one here that looks like it's nice and parallel from the collagen fibers, and then it also we have down here with the loose one. It kind of has a little bit of everything. We see some collagen fibers, we see some elastic fibers, we see the lines going through it. That's the big distinguishing characteristic for it. Okay. Oh my goodness. Well, that was a lot. Okay, so that is 13 different types of tissues down. We're still not done yet, guys. We still got just a little bit more to go, okay? So name 3 fiber types found in connective tissue. We for sure did that, okay? For sure did that. All right. Identify the structural components of bone tissue. All right, we talked about that, like osteons, stuff like that, okay? Next up, we have the muscle tissue types. We'll be going through that. Besides that, we're still chipping away at the general learning objectives here. We're almost there, guys, okay? So just keep going with it. Almost there. This is, I think, the longest video. I think it's been more than a half hour. The last one was a half hour. I think this one just beat it out. But like I said, this one's going to be probably the one that you might spend most of your time on, but we'll try and make muscle and the nervous tissue the most easy, okay? All right, guys. Keep chugging. TK needs a little break here, and he'll come back, make the 3rd video. Besides that, TK is out.